Hi everyone. I'm going to talk about the Declaration of Independence, which is very exciting. And of course, the date you should all know would be July 4th, 1776. So a lot of you have been working on memorizing the Declaration of Independence, and we've learned a little bit about it through what we read last week. But again, I feel like that was more of a brief version, and I want to kind of give you a little more of an in-depth discussion of the reason we did it and what happened and who the people who are involved. So we're going to meet Thomas Jefferson and John Hancock. I'm also going to show you some pictures of my travels relating to this. So I will be narrating that as well. So let's get started. So Declaration of Independence. So in June 1776, Richard Henry Lee brought into Congress a resolution that these United Colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. So he brought it to their attention. Congress appointed 5 men to draw up a Declaration of Independence. Who were these men? They were Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams. Those are all names you've heard of, right? You may have not heard of Roger Sherman and Robert Livingston, but they were also involved. However, paper, except for a few words, is the work of Jefferson. And so they were, pretty much he wrote most of it. And they maybe kind of helped edit a few things, I guess you could say. He's generally called the father of the Declaration of Independence. So let's pause and talk about who is Thomas Jefferson. We talked about George Washington, and you probably know a little bit about him, but just some details. He was not only the author of the Declaration of Independence, he was a man of many talents. He was the architect who designed the University of Virginia, his home Monticello, and the Virginia Capitol. It's pretty cool. He was also an inventor and scientist. He invented the lap desk, decoding device, and developed the decimal system. And all those decimals you're learning about, well, there you have it. You know the inventor now. In the war, he served as a delegate to the First and Second Continental Congress, and he later became the 3rd President of the United States. So there's a picture of him. So he was born April 13th, 1743, died July 4th, 1826. How interesting that he passed away on the 4th of July. I find that very, very interesting. And again, just some of the words that he created. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Love those lines. Oops. Here we go. So, back to July 4th, 1776. This paper was adopted by Congress after hours of discussion. John Hancock, President of Congress, was the first to sign. Crowds of people were anxiously waiting in the street in front of the old State House in Philadelphia to hear the decision of the Congress. Then the Independence Bell pealed out loud and clear, announcing the birth of the United States of America. Pealed is like another word for ringing out loud. Copies of the Declaration of Independence were promptly sent to every colony where it was read. However, in Pennsylvania, where it all happened, this reading took place in the yard in front of the State House, which has ever since been known as Independence Hall. I think I've shown you a picture of it before, but I'll show it to you again. It was there that the Liberty Bell hung and pealed out the happy news. When the tidings reached New York, they were joyfully received by the army, and the Sons of Liberty pulled down King George's statue. So, yeah, they had a statue of King George in New York. So that was a very, very big deal. And what they did with the statue is they sent it to Connecticut, where Patriot women broke it up and melted it to make bullets for the army. Yeah, that's a big ouch for King George, huh? So, needless to say, things were moving in the right direction. Just some pictures that I took. So I was in Philadelphia this last summer on my little trip, and I'm not sure if I'll get to go again this year, depending on how things go. But I'm actually going back to Philadelphia, which I'm very excited about. I'll be seeing other things, but we toured the Independence Hall. So there it is, and that's where the bell was. But the Liberty Bell didn't last very long. As we know, it broke. There's the line there. So it is, of course, across the street. It was so bright, but that's actually Independence Hall right behind the Liberty Bell. So they have a special little spot for it. And they have security and everything, and it's quite a line to get inside. And so I got a picture with it. So there's Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell, which is pretty cool to see. Okay, let's talk about John Hancock. So we know him as the person who signed really big. And he was the first to sign because he was the president of Congress. So it makes sense. But let's get to know who he is. So he was a wealthy merchant in Boston. He was against the British taxation, and knowing his wealth and power, the British wanted to capture him. I don't know if you remember that when we were learning about Paul Revere. Just remember, he warned him so he could escape. Him and John Adams, actually. So Hancock was the president of the First and the Second Continental Congresses. He was most known for being the first to sign in big, bold letters the Declaration of Independence. And this made the British want to arrest him even more, right? Because he wanted them to see it. If you read it, hopefully you read the article last week about the Declaration, and I asked that question, why did he write it so big? And I think a lot of you answered that question because he wanted King George to see it, right? Without having to use his spectacles. To make it very clear. So here we have, and again, he was born January 23rd, 1737. He died October 8, 1793. People still refer to him today when they write their signature. They write their John Hancock. So people say, oh, write your John Hancock. That just means write your signature. So as you can see, there is his big signature, and then everyone else is much smaller. And there's a picture of him. And just side note, not necessarily relating to Declaration of Independence, but when I was in Boston, I got to see some cool, they were featuring John Hancock in the Old State House Museum in Boston. So I have some pictures of some artifacts. So this is one of his jackets. It's like a red velvet jacket. It's a journal, kind of a leather carrying case, and then like a trunk. And this was his front door of his house. And so what they did, they were able to save it, and pretty much this is what the front end of his house looked like. And they were able to restore it, and so it's a piece that's on display in the museum, which is kind of cool. So it's a very wide door. It's really interesting. I think it's cool. So just some John Hancock artifacts that I was able to see when I went to Boston. And while I was in Boston, which actually was inside this building, it was also a museum, this is the Old State House in Boston. They all had state houses. There was the one, of course, in Pennsylvania, which is Independence Hall. And this is the place where they read out loud the Declaration of Independence to people in Boston. So they stood out here on this balcony. And so this is me inside, and I was standing right here taking a picture of the balcony and what their view would have been. Obviously, wouldn't have looked like this back then, would it? All these cars and big buildings and everything, but the people would have stood out there. This is also where Boston Massacre happened. It was right in front of this building. So it was down the street here where it all happened. Paul Revere was standing about right there where he witnessed everything to do his famous engraving that you have seen. So just another fun fact, because I didn't really get to talk to all of you about Boston Massacre because that was earlier in the unit. Anyway, I hope this has inspired you to hopefully memorize the Declaration of Independence, and if anything, to appreciate our brave forefathers and the history of our wonderful country. And that's just a full picture of the Declaration of Independence. You can go to this in Washington, D.C. if you would like to see it in person. You can't take a picture of it because it's very important, but the original document you can see in the archives, or in the National Archives Museum. And unfortunately, I didn't make it there, but even if I did, I wouldn't have been able to take a picture for you. So you just have to go see it yourself, just like I plan to do next time I go to Washington, D.C. So I hope you enjoyed this and learned a lot more about what you were memorizing. All right. Thanks, everyone.